Hi and welcome to this video in the QPSMR Real Productivity Gain series, and in this video we're going to look at understanding the contents of your QDF. So as any regular user of QPSMR Insight or the QPSMR Companion would know, that the QDF is the key file that holds all of your control for your particular project. It doesn't hold the data, so you can see here I have a QDF that is my questionnaire definition file and an ASCII data file that contains my data. Now, you don't usually open up this file except in QPS itself, and indeed if I were to click open with, I could choose the companion or QPSMR Classic and it would appear something like this here as a QDF. I'm using Insight here to open this, and you can see a list of all my questions. And if we work down here, you can see I've got a question called gender, region, question 3, and so on, a variable here and another variable at the bottom. But in this video, we're going to dig a little bit deeper and look at the contents of your QDF in terms of what the file really contains, rather than opening it within QPSMR. Look at the reasons for opening it in another way and the reasons for not opening it in this particular way, and also perhaps stress the care you need to take if you do open the QDF in an editor. So what I'm going to do now is to have a look inside this QDF, and I'm going to, first of all, before I ever open up the QDF in any other way other than QPS itself, is I always take a backup copy, because if I make a mistake in here, it could damage my file. So I'm just taking a backup of this, and you can see now that I've got a copy of it. So let's have a look in this copy of this file and see what exactly I got. And I'm going to open it with a editor. I'm using a Vine most often for my editing, but you could use Notepad here. So let's click on Notepad and choose that as my editor. And let's have a look at what we've got in here. And when you open up your QDF this way, you see you've got a very structured file with lots of commands in here. You can see they've all got a letter in the first and sometimes the third column with some notation after that. Now, it really is, I can't stress enough the importance that when you work in such a file here, if you make a catastrophic mistake, it will possibly corrupt your file and mean that it won't open cleanly, or you'll lose one of your questions. So real care is needed here, and I would also recommend that you take a copy before you do any such changes, because if you were to make a mistake, it would cause many problems, or potentially many problems. Now, let's perhaps, rather than looking at the top of the file here where there's a lot of control information, which you can learn, and we're always happy to teach you what that means, let's start at really the core of the questionnaire and what you actually see when you open a QDF on your screen. And you'll see that what you get here is little chunks of codes here, which often start QB to begin a question, QBE to end a question, and you can see here we start another question. And this format has to be exactly precise, so really don't damage it. If you do make any changes to it, really preserve the integrity of it in terms of exactly where each piece of text appears. Otherwise, you might find it doesn't open cleanly. Now, one of the reasons that people sometimes think it's a good idea to open up a QDF is to perhaps correct a spelling error that's prevailing all the way through a QDF. Now, that's not a good reason. If you wanted to perhaps correct a spelling error of a brand that's perhaps appearing many times within a QDF, that's not the way to proceed. My recommended way of working there would be to export the project to a CSV file, so you can just output the whole project to a CSV file like this. So let's output it, and we're going to call it text, and edited it, typed it wrongly, text and definitions. Click on that, and you'll see that what that's done is made a CSV file called text and definitions, and this is a much safer environment for correcting simple spelling errors that you might have made. So then I would open up this file in here as an Excel file, Excel's not behaving. And in here, I could make my text a definition. So if I wanted to change any occurrence of USA to United States, I could just use find and replace here and select USA and change it to United States, replace all. Well, it's found 4 replacements. Close that, save it. And now what I could do is in QPS, I could just go project update from that CSV. And if I go project update from these definitions, update it. I seem to have left the file open there. So let's just quickly close that and retry. And it's now told me where it's made those changes, Q3, Q8, and in analysis breaks as well. So all the occasions where I had USA appearing have now been changed to United States. And if I go into question 3, look at responses and go to my list, you can see USA has been corrected. So if you want to do that sort of thing, that's not the place to really do it. You could edit the QDF and locate it and make changes, but you're just making taking a bigger risk than you need to. The example I'm going to use here is going to be where you want to make something to several questions, and you can perhaps do this in the companion, but still this is a good way of doing something very quickly. Now, one of the things that's wrong with this file is here, if we go to responses, you can see that although I've got scores applied here or stated here in the text, I haven't actually got a score actually input. So what I can do here is I could input this score here, go down to my next response, apply the score here, and the next one, apply the score here, apply the score here, and apply the score here. Save that. So now I have got scores applied to question 12A. And if I was to save this now, so I'm going to quickly close this. Well, it's actually on the copy here, so I'm just going to quickly close that. If I was to save that file now, what I'd get is I'd get 12A now with the scores applied, but B, C, D, and E wouldn't have that applied. So I can now go into the QDF, open this in Notepad, just expand that so we can see it, locate Q12A, and if we go down here, you can see now the scores have been added, so it's got this extra line in here, whereas Q12B, if we go down there, just has the text with no scores applied. Now with great care, I could grab all of those pieces of text, make sure I grab the same thing, and I could replace them. So now I'm going down here and replacing them, which is of course a lot quicker than going through each individual one and making the change. But again, I have to do this with great care. And of course, I did take a copy in case I made a mistake here, and that should do the job. So now I could save this QDF. And if I was to open it again now, so if we close that and just reopen it, so let's open it again with QPSMR. And when we open it now, you can see that if we open up Q12B, look at responses, and you can see I've got the scores 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 applied to each of those particular questions. So let's have another look now at the QDF and just see what's in it and just understand some of the basics. We're not going to do everything in this session here. Let's open up here. So let's go through some questions here that we've got. So as I said, they start with QB and end with QA. So you'll see here then the next line contains the question name in square brackets with a space and then the text that applies to it. And here we can see the type, which is an integer, the length that is 6, sorry, the location that is 6, and the length that is 1. And if we flick back to our QDF opened up in QPS, we'll see there's iWave, size of 1, and it's in 6. Let's go back now to the next entry, which is question gender. There's the title gender. This type is single. The location is 7. Again, the width is 1. The texts are male and female. If I go over to the screen here, you'll see that's exactly what I've got here. 2 responses, and it's in location 7. So you can sort of start to see what goes on here between these sort of the actual opening the text file in Notepad or some other editor through to actually looking at it in QPSMR Insight. And then we come to a variable. So further down here, remember we had a variable called VQ6. So if I go back to the QDF in QPS, here we are, VQ6 got the butterfly symbol, Q6 in ranges. And if we now flick back to the code that's been stored for that, we've got a VB, which is a variable begin. The variable name is VQ6. Its text is Q6 in ranges. The type is single. The first response picks up 1 to 200. That's the text. And Y here is the code, which means it's the definition. So it's picking up from question 6, anybody in the range 1 to 200. And then the next one's 201 to 500. The definition is Q6 to 100, and so on down to the end of the variable. And we go through our questionnaire all the way like that. I think there's a variable called banner at the end, which was used. We scroll down to the end. We'll see analysis breaks here. So these are the banner to be used on a lot of tables. And then we got here that it's a multi. The first response is gender with a heading of male, and the definition is gender of 1, and so on. And down here we've got region. So you can go into these files and you can edit them. I could change this definition if this was a complex definition, or I wanted to change something in here, I could do so. Generally, it's better to edit inside QPS itself, but if you've got a large number of repetitive changes where you've made a mistake, this might be a tool that you'll want to use, or a way of doing it. As I say, having made a copy of the file so that you know, if you did make a mistake, you can always go back to a copy and correct it. But say we had some complex definition in here and we've reused that definition several times, it could be quite tedious to go through and edit lots of variables, for example, and it'll be quicker generally to edit the QDF. But as I say, you need to understand that QDF and edit it with care and really stick to the syntax and the exact layout that you've got in that file. Well, that was useful. If you want any more help with understanding a QDF, please just contact our support and we'll be very pleased to help you. Thank you for joining me on this video.